You're listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin in association with Rapha, the fastest clothing in the world tour, the home of cycling with character. Ride and watch with Rapha in 2019 as they partner EF Education First and Canyon SRAM.
You are listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin, brought to you by Skoda. Dedicated to closing the gender gap in cycling, one race, one cyclist at a time. This is our time.
My brain stops working about this time, is what you just said, Orla. That's a direct quote.
Well, we're recording this in the evening. It's an hour later in Amsterdam. It's 8:30. The kids are in bed. This is when I usually moan. So I'm just moaning with company tonight. It's rather lovely. Thanks for joining me in my living room. It promises
much for the December episode of the Cycling Podcast Féminin.
Sorry, I forgot we're recording.
My name's Richard Moore. I'm with Orla Chennaoui.
Hello.
Whose brain may or may not be working. And Rose Manley. Rose, I hope your brain's working.
Oh, sharp as ever, Richard.
Razor, you're going to get cut there. I hope you brought the sticky plasters.
Although I am halfway through a little beer here, so both of us, me and you, Richard, are going to probably, our brains will take a dive as we go on.
So I'll have baby brain, you'll have beer brain. This is going to be a wonderful episode.
We'll be relying
Happy
on
Christmas.
Orla. Yeah, we'll be relying on Orla. This is our Christmas episode, isn't it? Merry Christmas, everyone. It's a bit early for that. But
it's not early, it's December.
We are looking back on the year. We're going to cover some of our highlights. There's a bit of news as well, though, isn't there, this month? Would you like to rattle through your news roundup, Orla? Rattle through.
That suggests a speed that you're hoping for.
I think it should be more like a jingle through.
Yeah, I'll jingle through the news roundup, shall we?
Meander on through.
Cue the sleigh bells. Oh, I love a sleigh bell. Right, anyway, let's crack on. Obviously, no women's world tour racing since we last spoke. We did have a familiar name winning the latest round of the DVV Trophy cyclocross in Belgium, though. Lucinda Brand winning a new urban cross course, beating Ceylon del Carmen Alvarado of Corendon Circus, with Annemarie Vorst beating Sanne Kant in 2/3. We learned as well that Marianne Vos will get her cross campaign underway at the Brico Cross in Belgium. That's on the 7th of December. She rode her first full season of cyclocross in 3 years last winter, won the overall World Cup title for the first time, amazingly, in her illustrious career. She's back to a reduced programme for this season, but given the success she enjoyed all round last year, probably not a surprise that she's racing a hefty cross season nonetheless, with 7 races on her programme as it stands. Away from the bike, Sofie De Vuyst has admitted to failing an out-of-competition doping control. She won, of course, Brabantse Pil at the start of her season, with top 10s as well in Omloop Het Nieuwsblad and Omloop Van Het Hageland. She won the mountains classification at the festival Elsie Jacobs and the Lotto Belgium Tour, and a top 15 finish at the World Championships as well. Her Parkhotel Valkenburg team have announced that they have suspended her pending analysis of the B sample. De Vuyst herself has protested her innocence. She says she is completely in the dark as to how this could have happened and is vowing to clear her name. And finally, we have the very unusual news that Sofia Bertizzolo, the Italian who finished just off the podium at the Tour of Flanders this year and who had been riding for the now defunct Team Virtue Cycling, had been picked up by Movistar for next season, but it now turns out that a legal loophole means that because she has a contract already with the Italian National Police team, she can't ride for Movistar because they're set to become one of the Women's World Tour teams next year. And that means that she would be riding as a professional and wouldn't be allowed to double up on contracts. Now, this is all quite complicated, and it's a bit of a messy legacy from the fact that many female pros needed extra income, or still do really need extra income to support their careers. So what happens is, in some European countries like Spain and Italy, the national cycling federations work with the governments to give female pros a job with a civil service to support their cycling careers. Well, Bertizzolo was able to have this contract while she was riding for Virtue, but with the new two-tiered system being introduced next year, female riders can now officially be recognised as professional athletes, and under Italian law, a rider cannot be recognised as an employed professional athlete outside of their role with the civil service. So in Bertizzolo's Solo's case, the Italian law means she would have to class herself as self-employed to be able to ride for Movistar as a pro and keep her job with the Italian Armed Forces. But this clashes with laws in Spain, where Movistar is based, as an athlete cannot be classed as self-employed. So very messy, a few different legal jurisdictions coming into play. But it basically means that Bertuzzolo cannot ride for Movistar next year.
A community around the world. Stories and films with the most compelling characters. The world's finest apparel. Explore the world of cycling with Rapha.
Thank you very much indeed to our headline sponsor, Rapha. Grateful as ever to them for their support of the Cycling Podcast Féminin. Check out all the Gone Racing films with EF Education First at rapha.cc and on the Rapha YouTube channel. Rose is just scratching her head here. Quick summary, Rose, of the Movistar situation.
Oh, I can't believe it. I trust you to... I think with, complete trust, I can say just before this segment, I don't quite understand it. And I think that should put me in the clear for not having to say too much about it.
It's okay. I think it is a confusing situation. I mean... To
be fair to Rose, she was actually scratching her head because she was trying to work out how Bertuzzolo could resolve the situation and whether she could set up a limited company for herself. And it wasn't just that Rose wasn't understanding the situation.
I know. But
she's trying to work her head around international employment law, really.
Yeah.
We did an event the weekend there with Lizzy Banks, who we'll hear from later in this episode, and she was talking a bit about the money in women's cycling. There was a point in the evening in our show in Manchester where Adam Blythe was talking about the salaries that the male riders are on, and he was saying that some male riders are on 4 million or so a year and can afford to take all their family with them on a training camp. He then added, some riders are only on about 100 grand and they can't really do that. And Lizzy Banks sitting beside him was just looked sort of ashen faced and said that. She said, do you know what it's like in women's cycling? I mean, Sofie De Vuyst, who you mentioned has failed a drugs test for a steroid, she's one of those who works full time. Lots of riders work and have to, obviously, and this is where the UCI introducing World Tour status and demanding that teams have minimum salaries and so on. We'll see how that unfolds, but it can feel certainly to even some of the riders that it's a big sort of stretch to get to that point at this stage.
Well, it's the irony, isn't it, of trying to professionalise the top of women's cycling, and that meaning that a rider who is, she is one of the best in the world, cannot then turn properly professional because she has this other income to support her career. And we have been asking just how ready, I guess, all of the teams are for a minimum wage and whether a minimum salary is equivalent to a living salary. I think it's probably not. The UCI have to start somewhere and, they've got to be commended for that. But certainly it's not going to be as clean cut next year as any rider who's on these top teams is suddenly going to have even a living wage. It's going to take a couple of years for this transition and probably quite a bit longer, but really unfortunate for Bertuzzolo to be caught in between two stools here.
And the other big story has been the positive test that I just mentioned for Sofie De Vuyst. She has had a great year and had agreed to move to Mitchelton Scott for next year. She's 32 years old and that move is obviously in doubt. She faces a 4-year ban if the B sample also comes back and confirms the A sample, which most people expect. It's very rare that doesn't happen. They're pushing, she and her partner Bart de Klerk are pushing for the B test to be conducted as quickly as possible. It's a bit of a turbulent period for the team, Parkhotel Valkenburg, isn't it? With some doubts around Lorena Wiebes and whether she will stay with that team next year. She's been very open about the fact that she wants to move and is even arguing that it's not in the team's interest to keep her because it is a development team. If she's the top ranked rider in the world in the UCI rankings, there's it's kind of important that they support her more in races next year, and that focus on supporting Lorena Wiebes, a sprinter, could actually take away from the team's ambitions, which are to be a development team and to develop young talent. That's her argument.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. Oh, sorry, Orla. I mean, I think that's a bit of a naive point of view, to be honest, because all teams kind of relying on a number of points, of a number of exposure for their sponsors. It's not like their sponsors, the sponsor Parkhotel Valkenburg, want fewer wins because the development side of things is more important. I mean, I think it's really difficult for development teams in cycling, and I think if they do find a huge talent like Lorena Wiebes, then of course they're going to want to. They discovered her. That doesn't mean that she immediately leaves, because she isn't a fully developed rider, so that she leaves once she's achieved a certain amount of success, because then that just doesn't give anything back to the sponsors.
And we've talked about this before, haven't we? Both in men's cycling and women's cycling, is that difficulty of teams unearthing talent and nurturing that talent, but then not getting any percentage of any buy-on once that rider moves on somewhere else. And I think it is a bit naive to assume that a development team is a development team because of altruistic ambitions. I think really they're a development team because they don't have the budget to be anything else. And so if they can class themselves as that, great. But obviously they want wins, because that's what justifies their presence and that's what gets them column inches and television coverage and all the rest of it. Yeah, I think that probably is a bit of an unresolvable situation for both teams to realise their ambitions there. Teams as in parties. Yeah,
I mean, it hasn't held her back this year. She's racked up quite a few big wins and has had decent support as well in some of these races. Demi Vollering, who's had her own results and is a talented climber, has actually been helping her out a bit in the sprints as well. So it doesn't look like it'll be in either party's interest to stay together at this stage, and it's probably just a haggle over money. I spoke to the Parkhotel Valkenburg general manager, Esra Tromp, former rider, to get her thoughts on after such a successful season for them, where they performed really above everybody's expectations, to go into the winter in a state of a bit of turmoil.
So, Esra, this was your second year with the team, and it seems that you obviously learned a lot in year one, and the team rode extremely well this year. You must look back on the season with a lot of satisfaction.
Yes, of course. The team did really well. I'm super happy with how everything worked out. We started in 2018 and we saw a lot of things not going well. We changed that for last year, and we expected to do better, but so many wins, so many personal development in the riders. We didn't expect to be on this level already, but for sure we are super proud on where the team stands now.
Two young riders in particular, Demi Vollering and Lorena Wiebes, had real breakthrough years this year. I mean, you could argue that you've almost been too successful, because Lorena Wiebes is under a long contract, but is obviously getting offers from other teams. What's the latest with her? Do you think she will be a Parkhotel rider next year?
I can't say too much about this. You will see that in a couple of days where we stand with her. But for sure, we knew Lorena and Demi are really potential, really big riders. So we saw that already in the first few trainings, and also in the first tests we did with them. For Demi, it was particular her first year, so we knew she was capable physically on doing really great stuff in cycling, but to do also in the finals and be tactical really strong, is a real bonus.
It sounds like, I know you don't want to say anything, but it sounds as though if Lorena stays with the team, you'll be confident that you can support her ambitions.
Yes, of course. Otherwise, we didn't do this whole long period with her, with the long contract. Yes, of course, we are still developing as a team, and every year we become better, and so does she. And I think that's the coolest thing, if you can grow together, and I think that's really possible.
And the other news that's come out recently, which is not news you will have welcomed, is Sofie De Vuyst. I know that she's leaving for Mitchelton Scott, or planning to, but her positive test, how much of a shock was that for you?
Yes, that's the phone call you don't expect and you never want to have. But it came out as a complete shock. I had her and her boyfriend on the phone and last week, and I put the phone away because after a few minutes I thought, well, what the F is this, and what is this for message? And yes, of course, this is really not what you expect from a rider to hear. And immediately you think about the team and the sponsors and what it maybe could mean for the team. But now this is a thing. Sofie De Vuyst has to find out what had happened for a positive test, and all the sponsors made me clear that they never end the support without. So relief for me and also for the riders, and we have to see where it ends up. I don't know.
Does it lead to awkward conversations with sponsors? Are your sponsors, fully behind you and the team?
No, all sponsors are fully behind the team. So this doesn't have any effect on the sponsorships we have now. And for sure, that's one thing I was really scared of, because of course we have in all sponsor contracts the possibility to. If there's a doping case in the team, they can go out of the sponsor contract. So for sure I was nervous how they would react. But I called before the team released the press statement. I called every sponsor in the team and to tell them personally what was happened, and. Nobody withdrew from the sponsored contract, so that was a real relief for the team.
Chute à l'arrière du peloton, Cycling Podcast team car at the back of the pack, please.
That's PK, the voice of race radio at the Tour de France, interrupting this episode of the Cycling Podcast Féminin to remind me to tell you that it's sponsored by Stitch Fix. Now, Stitch Fix is an online personal styling service that takes the work out of dressing well. I've been signed up to it for a couple of months now. I know you've both been thinking, if not saying out loud, how smart I've been looking. But you've both signed up for it now as well, haven't you?
We have. I'm really excited about this. I have to say, actually, in our recent theatre show, Stitch Fix got an awful lot of mentions from the audience, everyone asking about it. I'm very excited about trying this out. I love a bit of new clothes. And I think it's a brilliant concept, having an online stylist. You go through an online survey to begin with. So Rose and I have done that. We haven't actually received our clothes yet, but we've done that bit. And I found that really good fun, if a little bit challenging in a way, because I felt like I wanted to get my answers right. I wanted to nail the style. And it was almost like, Rose, I was saying to you earlier, it was like when you were a little, well, for girls anyway, in particular, you would do that little game where you've got a girl in her underpants with lots of
paper girl, not a real girl.
not a real. Sorry, that in my head was obvious because I'm visualising it, obviously. Where you get, it used to be in comic books, like what was it, Bunty? What was that called? Anyway,
a few decades too early for me.
You get little label bits that you would stick various clothes onto the little girl's body. So like a skirt with a different jumper, or a jacket with a different pair of boots. And it was a bit like that, where you're sort of mixing and matching. So I'm really excited to see what they'll come up with, really, to see whether it does match my style. But then you get like 5 items in the post anyway. You choose what you want, you send back what you don't want to keep, and just pay for what you keep. So I think it's a lovely way to maybe experiment with new styles as well.
That's what I'm looking forward to, actually, is because I think that sometimes I go into a shop and I just pick up the same and also because I travel so much with work, as you two both do, I think you end up kind of picking up the same things all the time, because you think, oh, this works, so this will just work all the time. So I'm really excited to get something different, something that's going to be a bit adventurous, something I wouldn't normally choose when I go into a shop and trying it on. And yeah, I can't wait. It's like playing dress up, isn't it, as an adult?
It's very exciting getting your package, 5 items of clothing. As Orla and Rose said, you go to stitchfix.co.uk/cycling. You fill in a style quiz, tell us about your personal style and aesthetic, your budget, your size and shape, your fit challenges, your clothing needs and wants. A personal stylist will send you 5 items of clothing, each handpicked for you from a selection of 100 of the best European brands, including established names, cool emerging designers and exclusive brands. It arrives at your home, you try everything on, and you send back anything that you don't want. That's free. Postage and returns are free. For the stylist time, you pay a styling charge of £10, which is deducted from the cost of anything you decide to buy. So it's pretty risk-free, really. And it's a lot of fun. And like I say, I know that you've both been, admiring quietly my new look.
Well, I have vocalised it as well, Richard. You've got a discernibly but subtly new style, I think, or maybe just new clothes.
Just new clothes.
It works.
A refresh. A refresh. Well, go to stitchfix.co.uk/cycling. Get started with Stitch Fix and support our podcast. Go to Stitch Fix. That's stitchfix.co.uk/cycling to try Stitch Fix today.
So you may remember, guys, that I was telling you about, I think I was telling you anyway, that a few cycling federations had gotten in touch with me after I had written a meaty article for Rouleur, and they were asking me whether there was anything that they could or should be doing, without obviously breaching any confidences with the riders who spoke to me, to protect their riders from abuse. And British Cycling got in touch, but so did a lady called Kelsey Erickson, who is the SafeSport director at USA Cycling. Now, do we know about SafeSport? It was set up, you're shaking your head, it was set up in the wake of the gymnastics sex abuse scandals in America. And it's a wonderful tool, I think. It's across all Olympic sports, I understand, and it was set up to try to protect athletes, and a sort of a one-stop shop, if you like, for where they could go to report any kinds of abuse. Now, Kelsey got in touch with me because in my article I talked about a rider from North America, and she was saying that that they can protect, to a certain extent at least, their riders when they're in North America, but if they're competing and riding and training in Europe, then there's no way for them to protect them. And she wanted to try to reach out and get different contacts across Europe and across the world, really, to work a way around this. And her idea was to come up with, in the same way we've got an anti-doping code and a body, WADA, who looks after protecting clean athletes, she wanted there to be an equivalent for abuse. So an anti-abuse code and one body that riders could go to. And also that offenders then would know that there was a blanket suspension, a blanket ban, that they would all be treated the same, and that they would then be suspended or banned from the sport if indeed they're caught. And I thought it was a wonderful idea, and I just wanted to speak to her about that a little bit more. So she was over in Europe with the USA team in Holland, actually, but we didn't manage to catch up. But we're in the same time zone, so I gave her a call to speak to her a little bit more about what she's hoping to do. So here she is, Kelsey Erickson from USA Cycling. What kind of teeth does SafeSport, does your role as a director, a SafeSport director within USA Cycling, what kind of teeth do you have? What kind of power do you have?
So there's the SafeSport code, which has been designed and is enforced through the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. And as I mentioned, they're under the federal government. So they have total jurisdiction over anything related to sexual misconduct. We then, as a national governing body, have jurisdiction over the other forms of abuse. So let's say I get a report, allegation of emotional misconduct, we'll say from an athlete reports it against their coach. We would then, assuming that it's not related to sexual misconduct at all, purely emotional misconduct, then if we felt that it likely rises to a policy violation, we would hire an independent investigator who would do a full investigation of the reported situation. And then at the end of that, they provide us with a report that concludes with it's more likely than not that a violation has occurred, or it's more likely than not that a violation of the code has not occurred. And if it is that if they determine that it's more likely that it has occurred, then, we could do anything from, depending on the severity of the situation. I mean, the outcome could be anything from a stern warning letter to permanent suspension from our membership. So we have the ability to do that. When it comes to the sexual misconduct violations, the center could do the same. So they may send us, and again, we're not involved in that at all. They do their own investigation, and then they tell us, essentially, this is the outcome. So it could be, we've sent a warning letter. It could be this person suspended for 2 years. It could be this person is suspended for a lifetime. And that's from the Olympic movement. So if the center suspends them, it's not just that they're suspending them from USA Cycling. They're suspending them from the entire U.S. Olympic movement and every sport within that. One of the challenges that we see is that, as was mentioned, the U.S. is currently the only country that has a center for SafeSport in the way that we do, one that has, the backing and endorsement of the federal government and has the authority to take jurisdiction and do investigations and hand out sanctions. And so one of the challenges that we have as a U.S. sport is that, especially in cycling, like the goal of many, if not most cyclists, is to land a European contract, which is great. The only issue is that, as soon as that happens, chances are we lose any ability to have jurisdiction over somebody if something goes wrong, because we have jurisdiction over USA Cycling members, but the majority of our members that sign contracts and go abroad aren't being coached or supported by USA Cycling members. They're engaging with people in foreign countries and foreign federations.
And so how confident are you of being able to extend that network to an extent that all riders will be able to have some sort of protection? You've mentioned the idea of an anti-abuse code in a similar vein to an anti-doping code so that riders around the world would be protected. How realistic is that, do you think?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer, but I'm definitely going to try. I think the more consistency we can get, the better, and I don't see why there's any reason that it shouldn't be dealt with similarly to the way that, the anti-doping movement has evolved, where we have an independent organization at an international level that is there to provide a uniformed approach to anti-abuse or abuse prevention in sport. And then, each country or each federation then has their own unit, and it trickles down from there. We've done it in anti-doping. I don't see why we couldn't or shouldn't do it in abuse prevention. To me, it goes hand in hand, and I think it speaks to a broader issue of just sporting integrity and athlete welfare in general. And I think the more that we can kind of start to merge those under one umbrella in these different federations and NGBs and countries, the better.
So that was Kelsey Erickson from USA Cycling. And like I say, I think it is a brilliant idea. And in some ways, like all the best ideas, you think, why hasn't that been done already? Or why have we not thought of that already? I don't know. What do you guys think of it? I can't really think of many obstacles other than just getting it off the ground, I guess. But I think it's brilliant. Yeah,
I think it sounds great. I mean, it makes me think about kind of all those like Lance Armstrong documentaries that you see, and they're always like, and then the guy from WADA came after him, and you're like, oh, but then, and it's weird that there isn't a kind of similar body that is going to be chasing up on these things across all sports, and then there is a bit more of a direct threat. I guess it doesn't get around the problem that with people being uncomfortable to talk about these issues or finding it difficult to come forward about it. I mean, it doesn't make that any easier, but it just makes a clearer route of where, if you wanted to do that, where to go.
And I think maybe having that route would make it slightly easier in a way, although I know what you mean. It's still a very difficult and very sensitive issue to talk about, especially when it's maybe team relations or manager relations or whatever. But maybe just having an awareness that someone out there is looking after you and that there is something that can be done might make you feel a little bit safer, or at least might make you a bit safer, because it might be then that people of that persuasion might think, okay, well, this isn't the place for me to hide, actually, because there is a chance I'll get caught.
It definitely means there's definitely more pairs of eyes watching out for this kind of behaviour. And if they can prove that they can get people suspended or get people banned and do something about cases that come to them, then yeah, I think if people think that they're going to be believed and something will happen as a result of talking about what they've been through, then they're going to be definitely more eager to come forward. Because I think at the moment, you know, we've had very, like with Jess Varnish, for example, you know, we haven't had many examples of someone coming forward with a difficult story and then, you know, getting kind of a justice from that.
The Cycling Podcast Féminin is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport, fueled by science.
Thank you very much to Science in Sport for their support of the Cycling Podcast Féminin. You can get 25% off all your Science in Sport products at scienceandsport.com with the code. Now, at our live events, you know, there were people singing this, you know. This has been hugely influential. The code is, how are Crystal Palace doing now?
Very well. They're doing extremely well. They're doing a lot better than Watford, which is even better.
Is that because you're on the terraces chanting the Science and Sport code, which is SISCP25 at scienceandsport.com for 25% off?
It would be a little bit odd if I said the Science in Sport code, but I will do it now.
Worth a try.
Are you ready, Orla?
Well, are we trying it together again? Let's do it because we're preempting each other's
Yeah, I'm going to
delays.
just take my headphones off and then so I can't hear you.
I love how you're doing an anti-Band-Aid. You're taking the headphones off to do it.
Yes. Oh, yeah, massively. Okay, ready? SISCP25. SISCP25. CP25. CP25. SISCP25.
Woo! That worked.
Thank you, Science and Sport. Stock up on your Science and Sport products using that code at scienceandsport.com. Now, we are going to look back on 2019, aren't we? We've all got some moments of the year, and we've got a bit of audio, some interviews to play as well. Who wants to get this started? Rose, Orla? Who wants to go first?
I'll go. Why not? My moment of the year was twofold, really. First half being when I stumbled across the Portuguese rider Maria Martins at the Madrid Challenge. She's known as Tata Martins, I understand. That's certainly her Twitter handle. So we'll call her Tata. We're friends now. And she had just finished, was it 6th? I should have looked that up. At the Madrid
7th,
Challenge.
I think.
7th. And had no contract for next year. And so she had, before coming to Madrid, she had printed out her CV, laminated it, and was handing it out to team managers and director sportifs at the buses after the Madrid Challenge. So not only had she come hoping for a big result, but she put that extra pressure on herself, I guess, by bringing her CV with her and taking this as her moment in the spotlight and her chance to get a contract. And lo and behold, it worked. So I chatted to her in the press tent, and then it was announced that she has signed for Drops next year. And I just think it is blooming marvellous that she went around this unconventional route, I guess, to get the contract, wanted it so badly, and just there's a geekiness to it that I find deeply satisfying. There's like a nerdy schoolgirl bit of it that I think is wonderful. So I caught up with Tata very briefly this morning. She was flying from Hong Kong, where she's been racing. So she was in the queue for check-in. So there's a bit of a crackly line. Yes,
Sorry,
Richard?
I'm just going to say two things, Orla.
Yeah.
One is she was actually 6th in Madrid.
Well, so I was right.
So you were right. I was wrong.
Thank you very much.
The second is she was 2nd in the Omnium at the Track World Cup over the weekend. So a really good result from her there. And you spoke to her while she was checking in, so it isn't a great line. But we'll go straight from her to Bob Varney, her new boss at Drops, who explains how she came to join the team, and then we'll actually hear Bob's highlight of the year, which might also be close to Rose's highlight of the year maybe as well.
Oh,
the day that you were in the car with Drops.
Seamlessly linked.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
not the one you're going to pick, but another highlight.
No, my personal highlight of my whole year, professional or personal, would be that.
Sitting in the Drops car, hearing Bob motivating Abby May Parkinson as she rode off the front on stage 1 of the women's tour. So we'll hear a little bit from that. That was quite a memorable moment when Abby May revealed afterwards that she hadn't heard a word he'd said. But anyway, we'll hear first from Maria Martins and
Maybe
then
that's
from
why
Bob
it was her
Varney.
best day. Joking, Bob, joking.
Maria Martins and then Bob Varney.
Congratulations on your contract for next year with Drops. Did this contract come about directly then because of you walking around and handing out your CV at the Madrid Challenge?
Yes. Basically, I think it's what I have to do was that the CV, it's like our personality in paper. And the CV, it's like something that you can show the other teams that don't know you.
I'm presuming, Maria, that it's a very unusual way to get a contract, though, that not many female cyclists were walking around handing out CVs that day. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I never see that something like that. But when you want something, you just all the ways to get there, and that's what I did. I just try my best to get a contract, because I think I had a nice season with good results, and I just need to show to the others what I did, and it's not something that I don't have. I have results, I have races. I just needed to show them.
Well, congratulations, Maria. It clearly worked. And obviously not just because of the CV, as you say, it was your results ultimately and your performance that secured the contract. What is the plan for 2020 then? What are your ambitions with Drops?
First of all, I have in my mind the Olympics in my first goal. So the qualification for track Olympic, it's my first goal, and I will focus in the world like important races like classics, bunch sprint races, and I will try to help my teammates and do a great season for the team. I think it's a new family, and I just hope to get in and smash that with the other girls, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, so Bob, we're reflecting on the year. I mean, what are the standout moments for you from 2019?
You know, I think everyone's highlight is Abby May Parkinson's break on stage one of the OVO Energy Women's Tour.
140 to the front, 140 to the front. Great job, Abby May. Do not switch off behind. Come on.
42 kilometres.
Less than 10k now, Abby May. Come on, less than 10k. Come on, Abby May. Come on, you got this. All those years of training, all those years of preparation. Come on, this is it. Drive, drive, drive. Dig, dig, dig. Come on.
And 10 seconds advantage for rider number 85 with 4 kilometres to go.
Make them chase you all the way to the finish, Abby May. Really good job. You should be very, very proud of yourself today. Great job. Come on, girls, behind. This is just the start. We're here to race. Let's show everyone we're here to race. Come on.
We felt that was the one stage where we could hit the ground running, and it would get progressively more difficult to impact on the race as the week went on. So we had a plan that we wanted Abby May to be aggressive and to choose her moment, and she chose it absolutely perfectly. So yeah, that really won us over a lot of fans, and I think it epitomises the spirit we have in our team, really.
Well, we were lucky enough to have Rose in the car with you that day, so we got some of your great audio of you encouraging Abby May, only to learn that her earpiece had fallen out or not worked at the finish, so she hadn't heard any of it.
I think earpieces and riders are interesting things, because we're talking in the first part of the break, but of course she got over 2 minutes, and the radios don't work very well. Yeah. But to be fair, Abby May doesn't need a great deal of encouragement. She's incredibly driven young woman. So yeah, we set the plan and we gave her some early encouragement, but then she either had enough of that, took the earpiece out, or she went out of radio frequency. But I think Rose was impressed. That's the main thing. But yeah, I mean, we're all about being positive and making people believe that that the impossible is possible, and I think that really is what we're all about. And we have a very young team, and we've got more young riders next year. And if I don't believe in them, who does believe in them? Really, that's the message.
Well, you've got a Portuguese rider next year. I think it'll be the first Portuguese rider you've had, and an interesting story behind her, that one that we covered on the podcast. But tell me how she came to join the team.
Yeah, she sent us an email in 2018. We receive an awful lot of emails, so I replied to everyone, and Tata was one that I replied to. We didn't feel she was right for us at that particular point, but I keep an eye on a lot of riders, and some go on to great stardom, some you never hear of again, but we do keep in touch. So Tata again emailed in the summer, and I said we would let's keep the dialogue going, and what was her race program. So I followed her race program. Before Madrid, she did the Lotto Belgian tour, so I was in contact with her then. Of course, she had a standout result in Madrid, and she also had obviously a lot of publicity around her interview with Orla in Madrid, which made me slightly nervous, because I thought that might open the doors to a contract perhaps with a bigger team. So we were talking to her. We know her ambitions lay on the track next year. She's one of Portugal's sort of standout medal hopes for the Olympics. So we kept the conversation going with her, and she was still keen to join us. We were still keen to have her, and we thought that the time was right. We're not quite sure what her road program will be like. She's joining us for training camp in February next year in Tarragona, to get all the girls together. So yeah, she's very talented, she's very bright. I think she's got a long way in the sport. She's had some great results on the track, as well as that standout performance in Madrid. So yeah, we're excited to work with Tata, and I think she'll be a valuable part of our squad.
Bob Varney there, and before him on a scratchy line, Maria Martins, a Portuguese rider who will ride for Drops next year. And we heard Bob Varney talking about how he came to sign her, and also remembering that day where he had Rose in the car recording his motivating speech that he was delivering to Abby May Parkinson, that was literally falling on deaf ears.
Yeah, but maybe his highlight was actually having Rose in the car anyway, so it was a win-win for Bob that day.
I think I just built up his morale, and then that morale passed on to the whole of the team, and then that's why.
And as I said to him, we all use the audio of that to motivate ourselves all the time. I regularly play it when I get up in the morning. Anyway,
you do that with your stretches every morning.
Absolutely, 100%.
Mr. Motivator.
Let's move on to what's your moment of the year apart from that day, Rose?
Yes, well, it's kind of I was going to pick Kasia Niewiadoma at the Amstel Gold Race, but just hearing Bob then bringing us back to the women's tour. Remember, Kasia had a really great day there as well on stage 4, and what I remember is the weather was just appalling, wasn't it? Right at the finish, it was just grey and drizzly, and we just had like a little tent to stand in.
You had to be tough to ride your bike that day.
Oh yeah, you did. Wait a minute.
The one day that Richard got on his bike.
Not the one day.
I fell into that trap there. But yeah, it was horrible weather, and Kasia had an incredible win there in Burton Dasset. But that was her second win of the year, and my choice would be her first win of the year, which was the Amstel Gold Race win, which was just absolutely spectacular. And it feels like a long, long time ago now. But an incredible performance from her just on that last run up the Kalberg, getting quite a lot of distance from everyone else. And then slowly, like a shark in the background, Annemiek van Vleuten coming, catching her, and Kasia just not looking back. And eventually, just by like a tiny margin, winning the Amstel Gold Race, which was a massive breakthrough for her as well, because I mean, we always pick her as one of the riders to watch, but actually in terms of amount of times that she actually wins, she doesn't win all that often, and I think sometimes because her tactics are a little bit naive, she kind of ends up in a bit of a trap where she's going against two teammates, or she's such a gutsy rider that she'll do some incredible aggressive attack, but then just won't have timed it well enough to keep that distance to the end. So it's been great this year to see her break through that and actually take some glory for herself. It was such a gripping finale.
And, I mean, the men's race got a lot of attention that day because Mathieu van der Poel, the way that he won and the fact that he was heralded as this kind of great young new talent. But they're the same age, Kasia Niewiadoma and Mathieu van der Poel. It seems like she's been around for a long time, but she's still very young and just maybe starting to dominate those kind of races, because I think she's still a rider who's maybe not going to win the Giro Rosa or, you know, in the really high mountains, but on those kind of races, she certainly in the Ardennes as well, she's got every chance of winning. Shall we hear a bit from her looking back on that race? Because I did an event with her at the Rapha Cafe during the World Championships, and we spoke a bit about that win in particular, and she talked about the day.
During Amstel, believe me, like many times I was doubting myself. I was like, oh no, I'm the weakest, I'm the worst here, like I'm gonna drop soon. I had so many negative feelings, like demons were attacking me, you know? And after the finish line, I was like, oh no, like why I was doing that? Like couple, I don't know, kilometers later, I won the race. So I am strong, just my head was kind of weak. So definitely that showed me that there are barriers in your head, but not necessarily in your brain, in your body, sorry. And somebody also told me that, like, always your mind gives up first and then your body. So I kind of like try to think about it, that my body is capable of doing anything. I just have to stop overthinking.
Well, my moment of the year, I wasn't anywhere near the race, and it's for very selfish reasons that I've selected it. But we had Lizzy Banks keeping an audio diary for us at the Giro Rosa, and we'd met her quite a lot at the women's tour. We'd spoken to her a lot at the women's tour, and she'd come across. She rode very well there, finished in the top 10, and she came across there. In fact, she won our Pédaleuse de Charme, didn't she? She was very good at describing what happened. Very kind of bubbly and enthusiastic, and quite articulate in describing how the race was going for her and her team.
No surprise that she's got a job on this very prestigious podcast now.
Well, bar's very high, as you know, Rose. But yes, I'll get to that. But she was very impressive, and we asked her after that if she would mind keeping an audio diary for friends of the podcast at the Giro Rosa. And there was one day at the Tour de France where I was following the Giro Rosa on social media. You know, it was during the stage. And I saw from there that she was in the break. It was quite a big break that day, and then she was off the front. There was still a long way to go, but I was sort of following it from a distance. And, you know, it's almost a more exciting way to follow a race than watching it, when you're just getting little reports, little dispatches from the front line almost. And, you know, you're hearing mixed reports. 1 minute her gap is 20 seconds, the next minute it's 4 seconds, and you're sort of trying to visualize it in your head and imagining what's going on, and it's more gripping, more thrilling. And she did hold on, and she won the stage, and so that was fantastic. And when she sent through her audio diary for that evening, we listened to it in the car actually, and it was great. It was a really great listen. The whole diary was a great listen, and she is now a presenter on Service Course, or sister or brother, or I don't know, twin podcast, so that she presents with Tom Wally, and she's very good on that too. She did also take part in our event with us in Manchester on Saturday, so I grabbed a word with her about that day at the Giro in particular, and how she looks back on her season. Well, Lizzy, we're in the off season. I was going to ask you for your moment of the year, which I imagine was the Giro, but you were just telling us about Tour of Yorkshire, not one that people would maybe have noticed an awful lot at the time, apart from you and maybe your team. So when you look back on the season, is that a moment, a race that stands out for you as well?
Absolutely. I think, you know, people, if they are assessing my season, they would say, oh, your moment of the year is the Giro. But really for me, there are so many more moments than that, because I was coming from absolutely nothing this year. You know, I was coming into a European peloton. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And things like the race at Ronde van Drenthe, which I just went through hell and back so many times in that race. During that race, I learned how to ride in the crosswinds. I came 25th, which is not a result to shout about at all, but the journey I had during that race, and actually during the race 2 days prior to that, called Transacht van Westerveld, probably pronounced terribly. Yeah, the journey I had through those two races over those 3 days, it took me from kind of not having a clue what I was doing, not being in with a chance of getting results in these World Tour races, to suddenly thinking, okay, right, I'm strong enough, I can do this, I can fight hard enough. So that was really one of the first key moments of believing that I had what it takes to compete in the highest level. And without, you know, a kind of catalyst moment like that, perhaps the moments like the Giro would never have happened.
The women's tour as well. I mean, you were riding there with a sense, it seemed, of joy. You didn't have Cecilia Ludwig there, who's often the leader, and I guess there was maybe a sense of freedom that you had that you maybe don't have in other races.
Yeah, the women's tour was amazing. It was such a special race for me because it's something that I've watched, from its inception. For the last 2 or 3 years, I've been saying to my husband, Gabriel, I'm going to be at this race next year. I'm going to be at this race next year. And I wouldn't quite make it. And then I was finally here. So even to get the opportunity to be on the start line, I was taking, I was taking every opportunity I could. My family were there. My friends were visiting different stages. The atmosphere was just electric. Like it was something that, you don't experience that often. And who knows if I'll ever get to ride it again. You never know what's going to happen in your career. Of course, I hope to ride it many times. But it was something that was really special. Again, it gave you the belief that you can do it. To come 7th, I think, overall in the GC was, a real surprise, and is another step to help you believe that you can be up there with these top competitors in the World Tour. And you proved that at the Giro Rosa. I mean, that we were privileged enough to hear your thoughts on that as they happened, as you reflected on it that night. And you seemed almost quite calm about it, to take it in your stride a little bit. Is that how you felt at the time? And how do you look back on it now with a real sense of pride and satisfaction? Yeah, to say that I was calm about it was, I don't know, that's kind of funny because on the day I think I'd had about 1,000 milligrams of caffeine and I was just I was shaking after the finish line partly because I'd had so much caffeine, but also because I was so empty. I've never ever been that empty in my life. I've never gone that deep before, and that's what you can do once you've got your director screaming in the radio and you can hear that your teammate and a very good friend of yours is absolutely killing herself behind for you, and then comes second as well. So I was completely elated. Yeah, it was kind of easy to take a step back and look at it that evening, but I don't think I really realised what it meant until I got home and I got out of the cycling bubble. And then I came back to Sheffield and I had all these people talking about it. And actually, even at the Worlds in Harrogate this year, I was down in the physio room. And this lady said to me, oh, can I have a photo? And I was like, oh, no, you're going to want a photo with the other Lizzy. And she went, no, you're the Giro Lizzy. And it just struck me these things do resonate with people. People are watching women's cycling because women's cycling is really bloody good. Yeah, so it takes some time for these things to sink in. You always need to take a step out of the cycling world, kind of try and look from the outside into what you're doing to help you appreciate it. And that keeps you fresh because, you can become really complacent and then that's when you stop enjoying it. And, well, that's the end, I think. Well, Lizzy Banks, they're reliving her win at the Giro Rosa and also picking out Tour Yorkshire as a highlight of her year, a moment where she sort of asked for permission from her team to do something, did it, and subsequently was given a bit more freedom to pursue her own goals. So I'm sure she's going to go on to bigger and better things next year on the bike as well as in podcasting. Now, we heard from Christine Majerus, the Luxembourg rider, in last month's episode. I think you've got a bit more from her, Rose.
Yes, I do. I was kind of intrigued about, even for us who work in cycling, it kind of feels like, this is the off season and it gets a bit quieter and the racing slowly winds down. But for people like Lucinda Brand, who you mentioned earlier in your roundup, Orla, and Christine Majerus and Marianne Vos, the races just keep coming because they become cyclocross riders in the winter. So I was had a few questions about Christmas. So all of the big questions. How do you manage kind of a cosy family gathering when you have to both the day before and the day after get on your bike and get mud in your face and go for the win? How do you balance doing road racing and doing cyclocross as well?
As I always say, I just like the atmosphere in the cyclocross. I like riding the bikes in the mud, and it's just a complete different feeling than the road racing, and that's why I do it. And I also know that in the beginning of my season, which is a little bit shorter season in the winter, I won't be competitive at all in the bigger races, but I always kind of manage to be okay in shape in January, and I hope that will be the same this year. But until January, I try not to make too much of a fuss of it. Just race, have fun, try to take it as a good training and preparation for road season, and then only the last couples of weekends of the year I try to focus a little bit more on the racing.
So I mean, what's the most amount of time on in a year that you solid block of being off your bike and not training, not racing?
I usually try to do little breaks during the year, so I have 2 or 3 times during the year where I'm a week off, and then at the end of the road season I take 2 or 3 weeks off, depending on the holiday project and my mood to get back into training. So this year it was 2.5 weeks off in October, and then I just tried to get into it smoothly. So the first 2 weeks are also pretty easy training, and then it starts all over again. So I'm not the one that takes the biggest breaks in the peloton. I think some girls can take over a month off, but that's not working for me. I'm a little bit I need to move, because if not I'm a little bit not so nice to be around. So I need to move.
And what did you do? What did you do about Christmas? I guess you race, because you race just before, you race just after. Do you have to move Christmas and all that kind of overindulging to some other time?
Yeah, Christmas as a cyclocrosser is always a little bit a difficult period, because we cannot really stay long in family, because we race Coxside, and then there's some races after Christmas as well in Belgium. So it's more like, we take 1 of the 2 days to be with the family. At least I do, and then Christmas is over. So that's a little bit for me, but I'm not so sad about it actually. But I like also the Christmas feeling in Belgium in the cyclocross season. It's a little bit their own religion. So if we talk religion, we will be then cyclocross religious, if you could say that like that. But it's people don't necessarily understand it, but that's all I've been knowing for the last 15 or 10 years, so it's fine for me.
On the men's side of things, obviously, with like Wout van Aert and Mathieu van der Poel coming in, dominating road racing, and of course, like Marianne Vos has been doing that for years and years and years. Do you think that cyclocross gives you any benefits on the road, or it's just, they're 2 entirely different things that don't benefit each other?
I think if it wouldn't benefit, I wouldn't do it actually.
Yeah.
So yes, obviously, I think it's a big add to my road season, technically talking, and also power wise, because I don't go to the gym at all, because I don't like gym, and cyclocross riding is just often so much just power output, and that's just for me the perfect replacement of the gym. And if I see all the boys, pro boys now trying to get into smaller cyclocross races, it's making me actually smile a little bit. I hope they enjoy their time. But obviously it's not because you're doing cyclocross that you will become a Mathieu van der Poel or the Wout van Aert. But I think obviously you can, in any case, take profit out of it.
And I guess it gives you good kind of handling. I mean, people always say about cyclocross being great for if you're then doing a race on the cobbles like the Tour of Flanders, because of the handling. Do you find that is the case as well? It kind of sharpens those skills?
Yeah, obviously you can work your skills perfectly, and it's also with all the bad weather we have during the cyclocross season, when the weather is bad on the road, it's just business as usual if you're a cyclocrosser, and so mentally it's easier to get into it again and just do it till the end of the race. Whereas if you're coming from a sunny Australian summer, it's maybe a little bit harder to just be fine with the bad weather in the spring. So I think mentally it's giving you a big advantage, and technically as well.
That was Christine Majerus talking about cyclocross. We heard from her last month as well, of course, talking about the uncertainty around her team, Boels Dolmans. Any news on that? You're close to that team, Orla.
Well, not news, but there's been a lot of rumour swirling around, hasn't there? That Jumbo-Visma might be taking over Boels Dolmans, which would be the most beautiful fit, really, wouldn't it? It would make perfect sense. Jumbo as a company are trying to expand quite significantly, this supermarket company. They're actually building a huge, big distribution warehouse near to where my husband works in Houghton. But they are trying to become more international. And I guess that would fit with their company expansion plans as well. Certainly would fit with Jumbo-Visma. It'd be brilliant to have a Dutch men's and women's team. I mean, how powerful would that be? Would
it be a shame, though, for Boels Dolmans to cease to exist as its own entity, as a standalone women's team?
Well, it would be. It'd be a much bigger shame to lose the team altogether and for no one to come in and take over sponsorship of it. What they've done will stand anyway. They have been the dominant team, even with the advent of men's teams who've invested in the women's side of it. That won't change. I think, maybe that would mean we're less likely to get more standalone women's teams coming in. Who knows? But growth is growth, and you can't really pick and choose, I don't think. I don't necessarily think it would be that much of a shame because they've achieved what they've achieved. If somebody would come in and offer money for the team to remain standalone, then fantastic. But certainly when I spoke to Danny Stam, he was very enthusiastic about the prospect of a men's team coming on board. He didn't mention Jumbo-Visma, but he thought that would be a good thing and that there are obvious points to learn, in his words, from having a men's team and all the best practice and money and shared resources. So he certainly sounded open to that. And that's the rumour that's been doing the rounds. Not confirmed as yet, but it would make a lot of sense.
It would make a lot of sense. And we saw this year with Trek Segafredo, setting up a team from scratch is difficult, isn't it? There will be teething problems. Taking on a team that's already, up and running makes a lot of sense. Any other news for this last Cycling Podcast Féminin of 2019? Are we all going to be back? Are we all going to be back in 2020?
Well, I don't know, unless someone tells me.
Have you spoken to my agent?
Yeah.
I think our people are doing things, aren't they? My people talking to your people.
I haven't got any people, but I'm just gonna sit on your doorstep, Richard, and tell you.
Keep ringing that doorbell.
Yeah, or just climb over the garden fence and you'll just see me sitting in your shed.
Oh, it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be driving a hard bargain here, Rose.
Oh, right.
No, you don't really. You're not. I mean, Orla there talking about getting her agent involved, and here you are just throwing yourself at the Cycling Podcast Féminin.
I'm just desperate to talk about women's cycling.
Well, and we all know the reality. Yes, of course, we'll be back next year. Wild horses wouldn't keep us away. Can't wait.
Punching the air in delight.
It's going to be a big, big year, It's going to be a lot of change. It's the first year of a new era. See what that actually means in practice. It's going to be really exciting.
And
there's lots and lots of food
years,
to eat.
Orla. They're all big years.
They're all big years.
They are
big
years, but...
this bigger than ever.
Okay, then, big ears. Thanks very much, Orla. Not only for this month's episode, but for all of 2019.
Oh, thank you. Just 2019.
Can I just say, Orla looks like she's about to weep. With that
It's an emotional moment.
I actually get quite weepy whenever anybody gets emotional, especially this time of year.
I'm not
I've got
emotional.
my winter lights up here.
Let's not exaggerate.
We're ready for Sinterklaas here in the Netherlands, so everything's very cozy and gezellig, and I'm just waiting for the loveliness of Christmas. So if anybody's nice to me right now, I tend to cry.
Oh, but
then when my son poos in my hand, I cry as well. So I'm not really objective when it comes to this.
Well, you could try that, Richard, instead. A different approach.
You spoiled that there. Rose, thank you very much, not only for this month, but for the whole of 2019.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for the wonderful company and the wonderful chats and talking about women's cycling. It's been great.
I've got to say it back. Thank you, Richard, for 2019, I guess.
And if anybody wants to read about the Women's Tour in 2018 and 2019, there are chapters on it in our new book, The Grand Tour Diaries, available through the cyclingpodcast.com. Obviously, the Giro, the Tour de Vuelta in there as well.
Will they be ready for Christmas, Richard? Big question.
Well, the book is out, so if you want to buy it for Christmas, fine, go for it. The cyclingpodcast.com, £15. We'll post it anywhere in the world.
I feel like we should sing out the episode of the Christmas tune. That's almost become tradition, hasn't it?
Go on then.
What's our favourite Christmas tune?
I've just got SISCP25 in my head now.
Well, let's just go for the old favourite.
Jingle Bells.
Jingle Bell. Oh yeah. SISCP.
No.
25. No, I can't remember the next line now.
What?
Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride on a one-horse open sleigh. Hey, Rose, join me.
Well, I'm just worried because I've got my headphones on.
And so, okay.
But,
what fun it is to ride on a one-horse open sleigh.
Okay. Dashing through the snow
on a one-horse open sleigh. O'er the fields we go, laughing all the way. Ho, ho, ha, bells on bobtails ring.
You're listening to the Cycling Podcast Féminin in association with Rapha, the fastest clothing in the World Tour, the home of cycling with character. Ride and watch with Rapha in 2019 as they partner EF Education First and Canyon SRAM.